You can call me Hannah or Miss Sidney or whatever you want to. And this is my Bio Expo project. I'm doing the teaching category, and my presentation is on ADHD and genetics. Due to the sensitivities of this topic and the fact that there are probably students in this room, students definitely in the school that have ADHD, I'd appreciate it if, even if you have questions, just make sure that they're respectful. All questions are allowed. The types in diagnosis, for ADHD and ADD are different. They can often be confused, but it's awful when that happens because the types of medications to use to counteract these can have harmful effects if they are misdiagnosed. So for ADD, it's often diagnosed by symptoms of inattentiveness, off-task, unresponsive behavior, and problems sustaining activities for given durations of time. So this is known as kind of like a wandering mind, versus with ADHD, it's known for hyperactivity or restlessness, physical outbursts, inappropriate interactions with social groups. And in that case, there's so much energy that you want to focus on everything that it makes it difficult to focus. And what's interesting about ADHD is that it's often diagnosed by age 7, which is an interesting cutoff age because if you're above the age of 7, they don't often diagnose it, and often adults can have undiagnosed cases throughout their life and often wonder what's wrong with them. In the brain, people with ADHD do not produce enough dopamine, shortened to DA, or norepinephrine, which is NE. It's not just those two, it's also serotonin. Those are the 3 chemicals that helped focus thinking. We call those catecholamines. Catecholamines, there we go. They're produced by the adrenal glands, which are right by your kidneys. They're the things that produce chemicals like adrenaline and those type of chemicals that keep your brain moving. And the lack of those two negatively affect productivity and behavior. And with ADHD, it's not necessarily that your body isn't producing the normal amount of dopamine and norepinephrine, as well as serotonin. It's that your receptors take a higher amount to be at that focused point than normal people with regular receptors. So it's not a lack of the production, it's a lack of the reception. So currently there's no long-term solution for ADHD. There's just ways to combat it with stimulant medication, which is a type of pharmaceutical therapy, using medication to help increase focus in classrooms and school settings, behavioral therapy starting from a young age. Children can meet with therapists, adults can meet with therapists to discuss how they're doing at school and if they need that prescription for medication. And support and monitored schooling. I know especially here that there are kids who use 504 plans to get extended time on things because they need more time to focus or they need more time to get things done. How many people have seen something like this picture before or heard of meiosis? Yes, everyone here has been through biology, so hopefully at some point you've seen this. So genetics, as we know, are passed through the chromosomes of our parents, which is amazing. So when genes splice together, they separate, crossover, separate, crossover, and then separate again, and you either end up with when genes on your chromosomes transfer, they've discovered that the closer one gene is to another gene, it's more likely to cross over with that gene. So if you have 2 genes that you see often associated with one another, you can kind of determine using a formula that we're going to find out how likely it is that they're going to actually transfer together. So if 2 genes are at the bottom together, they're going to cross over, but if one gene's at the top and one gene's at the bottom, they're not going to transfer to the same chromosome. Due to recent research, they have discovered some chromosomes that they particularly attribute to dopamine receptors and serotonin receptors, and those include 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And today we'll be focusing on 5. So using family trees and informed genetics knowledge, researchers can develop genetic maps using the genes that we talked about earlier and the spacing to kind of figure out and map out how the genetics transfers. So OCD and depression can often be linked to the dopamine and serotonin genes, and so when they transfer together, they've noticed that people with ADHD can often have OCD or depression, and 1 is your NR, and you end up with bringing that equation down here, plugging in your numbers, you get 1. So amazingly, so your LOD score is greater than or equal to 3 is considered significant linkage. So it's very likely, not very likely, for this one, it is possible for them to be inherited together. I know this is a lot, and we're going to absorb it by doing some practice problems. Anybody would want to answer the question, should genetics tests and results be given to parents? Does anybody have an opinion about that? Or under what pretenses they should be given to parents? Go ahead, Fisher.
Parents have the right to know, especially if your child is having a problem or is ailing from something. Parents have the right to know. It is the same argument that you make that if the government is ailing, the citizens have the right to know, which is why we have a free press. Same with parents and their ailing children. If a child is sick, their parents have to know how to help them and to make sure that that can be fixed.
Right. What do people think about the context of wanting to know what genetics children are going to have for cosmetic purposes? Like, I know there's tests out there that are like, you can pay way too much money to find out if your child's going to have freckles, or if you're very proud of your red hair, if they're going to inherit your red hair. What do people think about the ethics of like cosmetic genetics research?
To give birth to a kid, that kid is their own. You don't have the right to completely alter or change or landscape it. I mean, a kid is an actual living being.
You want to know whether or not you have ADHD. It's like, I probably do now that you're telling me that, but would you want to know? Would that affect the effort that you put into school? Is that going to affect your long term? Is that going to affect how you see yourself and your self-esteem? And then a lot of scientists say that they should consent at the age when they are of age, but what is of age? Is of age when you're capable of your own independent thought? Is it an age? Is it a mental age? So it's just some food for thought there about the ethics of genetics and all of that. So in your groups, did you decide whether or not you would want to know if you were the third generation parents, if you had, or if your kid had ADHD or not, or a potentially deadly disease, a terminal disease?
Well, yeah, we kind of had trouble figuring out what the cons would be, but like you're saying on this slide, there are cons, but they aren't immediately what you think about, maybe.
Yeah, and then you have to use your empathy to understand how the child potentially feels. Yeah, down to you.
I think that if a parent wants to know, then that's great, but I think it just depends on their intentions behind it. For example, like, are you asking because you don't agree with those traits and you would change them somehow? Mm-hmm. Or are you asking because you care about the child?
And so are you going to affect how a parent's going to love their child and how they treat them. And that's the most important thing to recognize. I have envelopes judging based off of what you got as your LOD scores for people who want to know whether or not their group, third generation, would potentially have that. If you want to know, I have it. If you don't, you don't. Okay. We're pleased to inform you that your child does not have a terminal illness. How does that make you feel, though? That it's really right.
That's pretty nice to know.
And you can better help them if you do know.
Yeah.
And you're prepared for it. Like, if you're going into like having a kid and thinking that they're going to be healthy, then you're not like financially preparing, and you're not like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot more that goes into caring for a sick child. So if you know beforehand, you can like get the resources before that will help them
Live a better, happier life, no matter how long it is.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you all for listening. This has been my presentation. Thank you.